Yeah, man, I like the way you said it.
Same.
So repeat.
Okay. Why do you guys tell me why it's so hard for you, or why you try so hard to show up and be at your uh, grandkids' events?
Well, I just think it's important to them, and we enjoy it, but I think it's important to them because I look back and I was from a family that people weren't too involved in activities, and I probably was the only one of me and my siblings that was involved in the activities, extracurricular activities to speak of. And my parents didn't come to those things. I remember one time when I played kickball at Holy Name, looking up and seeing my dad standing right at the corner by the church building, but the game was over and he was gone. And he never mentioned that he came. And that was the only time I can remember either one of my parents coming to anything. Now, in retrospect, it didn't bother me, and I don't remember that it bothered me at the time because it's what I was used to. But where dad was concerned, in high school and even in college, before he was married, we were married, and afterwards, his parents came. I mean, mom, I know. Dad was one of the early ones that started wearing contact lenses, and I remember one football game. He lost his lens, and he was crawling. They stopped the football game. He was crawling on the ground looking for it, and Grandma came out of the stands and went down on the field to help find her Paul's contact lens. And so, I mean, they were always
Who
there.
found it?
She did.
Mom, I'm sure. Well, I can't remember that, but I'm sure it probably was Mom.
Yeah.
But I mean, so they were always involved to the point that mom was over involved, and it was kind of embarrassing. But I mean, it was her love. That's who she was. And I don't know, as you kids were all growing up, I just felt like you needed to have somebody there. It might not be both dad and I. It might be dad or I. Grandpa Casaro picked up the slack quite a bit. If there were three, like Dan, Greg, and Amy at some points, were all playing at the same time. So Grandpa Casaro always went to one. I mean, he followed the grandkids on with their activities as well. And this is a little aside, but I remember one time I was coaching Kristi, and she came. Well, that was a whole different thing. But I could hear we weren't doing something right, and I could hear Grandpa Casaro, my father-in-law, standing behind me saying, well, she ought to do this and she ought to do that. And I said, he never criticized me, but I'm listening to him and I'm thinking, yeah, he's right. So I made the change that he said. So I said those kind of things help too with your whatever you've been through before, your wisdom, whatever. But as my kids and grandkids have come along, it kills me not to go do everything. But we have to kind of spread it out. I always joke and say I have a spreadsheet and I put everything on it and I circle the ones that where we're going to go to try to keep them even in a week's time. I said, but then I've gotten so the varsity high school sports take precedence over the younger ones or in the colleges someplace else in the country. But I always felt even if our kids sat the bench, they needed to know that we felt like it was important, that they were good enough, that it took our time to be there and support them.
I think that's right. I've always felt that the extracurricular activities that you have in school, you learn, by studying your books and all that, but the extracurricular activities round you out, and it teaches you, you have to compete, and no matter if you're playing a musical instrument or if you're playing football, softball, baseball. And I wanted to show our children and our grandkids that we support what they do. And we're there to help, maybe not actually on the field, but at least we're in the stands cheering. And I always remember Greg one time when he was playing ball in high school, and we went to a high school game for some reason. And Greg was in the stands.
Well, it was after Greg graduated, and we were there with Mike Clements, and it was Steve.
Okay, well, anyway, Greg says, daggone, I didn't realize it's tougher in the stands with the parents yelling and screaming and looking at each other. It's harder to be in the stands and play the game, and it's
remember
true.
that.
I mean, you just sweat with your kids. You wish them well, and you can't perform for them, but you can sure hope and be there to support them, and that's why we go. Plus, we like to do that. It's fun.
I just
See.
wish we could go to everything
Yeah.
all the time.
If we could take care of the schedules and make sure that we had enough time to go to each one of them, we'd spread them all out. So it kills us to miss one of them.